The most powerful cartel boss in the Western Hemisphere was killed on a Sunday, not a Tuesday, not during a live trading session with every desk open and every algorithm running. A Sunday, while every exchange was dark and no price discovery was possible. By the time markets opened Monday morning, the power vacuum was already 24 hours old. Roadblocks were burning across more than half of Mexico's 32 states, and the highways that carry Mexican silver to American ports were physically blocked by armed men. Silver barely reacted. I need you to sit with that for a moment, because what I am about to show you is not a prediction or a theory. It is documented on the ground right now, and the paper price is ignoring every single piece of it. Mexico produces 24% of all the silver mined on this planet. 1 in every 4 ounces of global mine supply comes from one country. And now that country lost the single person holding its most powerful criminal organization together, with no clear successor, no heir, no one to restore order. And silver barely moved. That is not the market processing the news. That is the market not understanding what the news means yet. And by the time I finish showing you what is actually happening on the ground, you will understand why this gap between reality and the paper price cannot stay open permanently. Let me start with exactly what happened on Sunday, because the details matter here. Military intelligence tracked El Mencho to a remote compound outside Tapalpa, Jalisco. The breakthrough came from surveillance of one of his romantic partners. She visited him at the compound on February 20th. She left. He stayed. That was the window they used. 6 helicopters, special forces on the ground, armored vehicles advancing up a rural hillside. El Mencho's security detail fought back hard. 3 soldiers were wounded. 1 helicopter was forced into an emergency landing. 8 CJNG operatives died in the firefight, but the operation succeeded. Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes, El Mencho, founder and leader of the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, shot during the operation, dead on the helicopter being flown to Mexico City. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt confirmed it. Sunday night, U.S. Deputy Secretary of State Christopher Landau confirmed the death on the record. The Mexican Defense Secretary confirmed U.S. intelligence support was used to locate the target. This was a joint U.S.-Mexico operation on the most wanted man in the Western Hemisphere, with a $15 million U.S. government bounty on his head. Within hours, Mexico was on fire. El Mencho's right-hand man, Hugo H., known as El Tuli, immediately began organizing the response. Cartel gunmen blockaded highways across more than half of Mexico's 32 states simultaneously. Cars and trucks were set ablaze across Jalisco, Colima, Michoacán, Nayarit, Guanajuato, Tamaulipas, and beyond. Guadalajara, Mexico's second-largest city, became a ghost town. Puerto Vallarta was paralyzed. Witnesses at the Puerto Vallarta airport reported seeing execution-style murders in the parking lot. Delta, Alaska, American, and Air Canada all canceled flights. A Costco was set on fire. Gas stations were burning. 25 members of Mexico's National Guard were killed in retaliatory clashes, and Jalisco stayed alone. Now, here is the part that the financial press is almost entirely missing. And this is where it gets serious. The highways that went dark on Sunday night are not incidental to Mexico's silver supply chain. They are the supply chain. The primary trucking routes that move silver ore and refined metal from the producing states toward ports and border crossings for U.S. export run directly through the geography that was blockaded within hours of El Mencho's death. Mexico produces 190 million ounces of silver per year, and the arteries that carry that silver to the world were physically shut before the night was over. Now I want to show you something that changes the entire picture, because what happened Sunday did not fall from the sky. The foundation was laid 3 months ago, and almost nobody in mainstream financial media covered it properly. In November 2025, the United States Geological Survey added silver to the U.S. critical minerals list for the first time in history, not a routine classification. The critical minerals designation exists specifically for materials where a supply disruption would cause national security level economic damage. The USGS ran specific economic modeling. They built a scenario where Mexico stops exporting silver to the United States, not a gradual slowdown, a stop. And their conclusion was that this single event would cause a GDP decline large enough to cross the national security threshold. 70% of all silver consumed in the United States is imported. More than half of that comes from Mexico. The U.S. government looked at those numbers, modeled the disruption, and published the analysis 3 months ago. This week, that scenario stopped being theoretical. And here's where I have to be honest with you about something. When I first started mapping what El Mencho's death means for silver supply, I expected to find a complicated picture with real arguments on both sides. What I found when I went through the ground-level reporting is that the supply chain was already breaking badly before Sunday. El Mencho's death did not start this crisis. It accelerated a crisis that was already fully in motion. Let me show you what was already broken before this week. On January 23rd, 10 workers were abducted from Vizsla Silver's gated residential compound in Concordia, Sinaloa. These were not laborers picked up on an open road. Engineers, geologists, security personnel, administrative staff, taken from inside a secured perimeter that a publicly traded mining company built specifically to protect its workforce. 5 of those 10 have since been confirmed dead. Their bodies were found in a mass grave near the rural village of El Verde, 15 kilometers north of Concordia. 5 remain officially missing. The CEO of Vizsla Silver suspended all operations at the site. The Panuco project, which hosts the world's largest undeveloped high-grade silver resource at 102 million ounces, is now sitting idle. This happened when the Sinaloa cartel was intact and actively operating. That was the level of violence against a secured mining compound under conditions of normal cartel activity. Not during a power vacuum, not during a succession war, during normal operations. Now, here is the structural dynamic that makes Sunday's event so much more dangerous than what came before it. And this is the part nobody is pricing in yet. Al Jazeera's correspondent on the ground in Mexico City said it directly on record. There is no obvious successor to El Mencho, none. The CJNG operates on a franchise structure of approximately 90 semi-autonomous organizations across multiple states. El Mencho held those franchises together through a combination of authority, fear, and financial control. With that central authority gone and no designated heir, every regional commander is now calculating whether to hold their position, expand into neighboring territory, or align with a rival organization. Mexican security analyst David Saucedo told CNN directly that commanders will enter a succession war to determine who takes control. He did not rule out the possibility of a temporary agreement among top leaders, but he warned that even an agreement would not ensure peace. He said the cartel could adopt a posture of total war against the Mexican state if it interprets the operation as an extermination campaign rather than a targeted arrest. That process does not resolve in days. History says it resolves in months, sometimes in years. And every day it continues, Mexico's contribution to global silver supply compounds its disruption. Now let me show you what the supply chain actually looks like on the ground right now, because this is where the physical reality meets the paper price in the most direct and measurable way. Before Sunday's escalation, Mexican silver miners had already fundamentally changed how they move metal. After the Vizsla abduction in January, transportation insurance for refined silver bars in the affected states became, in many cases, impossible to obtain. The insurers priced themselves out of the risk entirely. They stopped writing the coverage, so miners changed how they move metal. Instead of refining ore into recognizable silver bars, operations in the affected regions started loading raw ore into trucks. Truckloads of material that looks indistinguishable from dirt. The silver is still in it. It just cannot be identified as silver until it reaches a smelter somewhere else. But watch what happens to that metal once it leaves the mine. Major industrial end users with the resources to arrange their own logistics have been structuring off-market deals to pull silver directly from Mexican producers. Air freight, private transport, militarized logistics chains, bypassing the standard commercial market entirely. Samsung confirmed exactly this kind of move. Samsung C&T finalized a deal with Canada's Silver Storm Mining, giving Samsung exclusive rights to purchase 100% of the La Parilla silver mine's output for 2 years, not buying on the open market, not through futures, locking up the entire mine directly at source. Think about the boardroom decision behind that. An executive stood up and said, "We cannot trust the market to supply our silver anymore. We need to go to the source before it is gone." And that silver is not going to COMEX. It is not being offered into the exchange delivery system. It is moving directly from mine to manufacturer through arrangements built specifically to avoid the public market. Every ounce moving through private channels is one less ounce available to replenish what COMEX needs. And COMEX needs replenishment badly right now. This is where it all collides. COMEX registered inventory is the physical silver backing every futures contract traded on the exchange. Think of it as the foundation underneath a skyscraper of paper promises. Right now, that foundation sits around 82 to 89 million ounces. 4 months ago, it was 167 million. A 47% collapse in 4 months. A drain running at 785,000 ounces per day, every single day, going one direction, out. Sitting against that 82 to 89 million ounces is hundreds of millions of ounces of paper exposure in the March futures contract. The math looks like 5 people claiming the same ounce. And all 5 now want physical delivery at the same time. The March 1st notice day is February 27th. That is the countdown. And the inventory backing those contracts has already collapsed by nearly half, with the drain still accelerating. Now, let me give you the historical comparison that makes the stakes concrete. When Russia's invasion of Ukraine removed approximately 10% of global wheat exports, wheat futures spiked 40% within weeks. Not gradually, all at once, after months of the market treating the risk as remote. A 10% supply disruption produced a price move 4 times its proportional size. because the market tried to price both the current shortage and the forward uncertainty simultaneously. Mexico is not 10% of global silver supply, it is 24%. In a market already running a projected 100 million ounce structural annual deficit, with a COMEX inventory that has already lost nearly half its depth in 4 months. Do that math yourself. Now, I want to give you the bearish argument, because you deserve to hear it directly, and I am not going to pretend it does not exist. The large cap operators in Mexico, First Majestic, Fresnillo, Endeavor Silver, Pan American Silver, have operated in complex Mexican security environments for decades. They have evacuation protocols, federal government relationships, balance sheets built to absorb cost increases that would destroy smaller operators. Mexico's government has enormous economic incentives to protect the mining sector. Military deployments to protect critical infrastructure have happened before and will happen again. And some analysts argue that removing centralized CJNG leadership could over time produce smaller, less coordinated successor organizations projecting less sustained power. These are legitimate points. They explain why the worst scenarios might not fully materialize. But here is what none of them address. The Vizsla compound penetration happened when the CJNG was fully intact. That was the level of cartel violence against a secured mining compound under conditions of maximum organizational stability. 5 workers dead, 5 missing. From inside a gated perimeter. What that baseline becomes during an open succession war is not bounded by any counter-argument. Transportation insurance for refined silver bars in the affected states is already unobtainable. That is not a risk assessment or a projection. That is the insurance market's verdict, expressed in the only language insurers use. They stopped writing the coverage. COMEX vaults are not being replenished. Vizsla's mine is idle. The succession is open with no obvious heir. And silver barely reacted. Every warning signal was already flashing before Sunday. The U.S. government published their national security analysis 3 months ago. The insurance market rendered its verdict in January. 5 workers died in a mass grave in Sinaloa. The mine sat idle. The COMEX drain continued at 785,000 ounces per day. The paper market looked at every one of those signals and said nothing to see here. Here's what you watch now to know when that changes. The first signal is geographic depth into the silver belt. The retaliatory violence has already spread across multiple states. The critical question is whether the sustained succession conflict penetrates Zacatecas, Durango, Chihuahua, and Sinaloa with enough force to impair production in those states specifically. Those 4 states are the core of Mexico's silver belt. CJNG chaos in Jalisco is serious. That chaos bleeding into those 4 states through a succession war is a structurally different event. The second signal is operational announcements from producing companies. Any press release using language about temporary operational suspension, workforce evacuation, force majeure, or even vague references to enhanced security reviews tells you that production disruption has reached a scale requiring legal disclosure. One announcement from one company immediately reprices every company operating in the same geography under the same conditions. The third signal is COMEX inventory. Watch whether the drain accelerates from its current 785,000 ounce per day pace. If the Mexican disruption starts visibly removing metal from the global pool that was expected to flow into COMEX warehouses, the inventory data will show it before any press release does. The warehouses tell the truth before the corporate communications do. None of these signals are at full intensity right now, which means either the market is correctly assessing that this resolves quickly without major supply impact, or the clock is simply still running, and the paper price has not caught up yet. Based on everything I have just shown you, I know which one I believe. The U.S. government told you this was a national security risk 3 months ago. They published the economic modeling. They put silver on the critical minerals list. The mine workers told you with their lives in January. The insurance market told you when it stopped writing coverage. The equity market told you when it suspended a mine sitting on the world's largest undeveloped high-grade silver resource. The COMEX inventory has been telling you for 4 months as it drains at 785,000 ounces per day. Every warning signal was already flashing. The paper price looked at all of it and barely moved. That is not the market being efficient. That is the market being asleep. And markets that are asleep do not wake up slowly. If you want this kind of analysis every time something moves in the data before the headlines catch up, subscribe and hit the bell. This is not information that comes with a press release telling you why it matters. Every number I showed you is verifiable right now. Check it all yourself and decide whether the paper price makes sense to you.